Welcome to the Coast to Coast podcast, brought to you by Play Picks and the Lines, coming to you from the West Coast. Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we are looking at a pretty fun couple of videos that we have for you today while we wait for these games to come back during this All-Star break. We're going to be looking at some title odds, some conference champs, etc., and then another video as well on the MVP odds right now and where they currently stand. So we'll get a look at some of that stuff moving forward. Make sure that you are staying on thelines.com to check out all the best and latest odds that are available. We're doing a great job of making sure you know which sites are giving you which odds so you can find the best place to find the best bang for your buck with all this stuff. As I mentioned, in this one, we're going to be taking a look at the Western Conference teams and some of those title odds and some of the other stuff that we like with these guys, even a few win totals that we still have left and things that we can check out right now. Some really good spots to find your, places to put your money right now. But Nate, let's start out with what we've got for the title contenders overall and then jump into those Western Conference teams.
Yeah. I mean, there's three tiers in my mind. And in the top tier, you have the Suns and the Warriors in the West. Right now, they're tied in terms of odds. All these odds provided by DraftKings Sportsbook right now. Suns at plus 425 and Warriors at 425. I also keep the Nets in that tier at plus 450 if they're in the dance with Kevin Durant. They are a title contender. And the Bucks at plus 700. Second tier, I put only three Eastern Conference teams right now. Sixers at 700, Heat at plus 1,000, and the Celtics at plus 2,500. And then the third tier, I have teams I consider too flawed to win a championship right now. The Jazz plus 1,700, Grizzlies plus 2,500, Bulls plus 3,000, Nuggets plus 4,000, Mavs plus 4,000, and of course the Lakers at plus 4,500. Just include them. But
I mean, you don't want to play them in a 7-game series, but they got to get there first.
Yeah, as long as they get 2 days off between every game, they'll be good.
Yeah.
But looking at that, I mean, the Western Conference, the first thing that jumps out at you is it's an easier road for the first time in decades, right? I mean, the Eastern Conference is deeper. It's better at the top overall, I think. I mean, that maybe not the top three teams versus your top three teams in the West, but I could make that argument quite easily that the Bucks, Sixers, and Nets, when at full strength, are tougher teams than the Warriors, Suns, and Grizzlies. The Grizzlies I put in there as flawed, along with the Cavaliers, just not, experience-wise ready to win a championship. And that would be the reason. I don't think that there's any issue with their rosters. But we're talking about the top two teams here, and we got to start with the Suns, who have been the most clutch team all season, putting up really historic clutch numbers right now, 24-3 in games decided by 5 points or fewer. They're 21-2 overall since January 1st, have not lost a conference game since December 27th, but Chris Paul out for the rest of the regular season, essentially, with a thumb fracture. I don't see them losing their 6.5 game lead here in terms of, clinching the top seed. I think they can keep chugging along with their backups in. Question is, how will CP3 reintegrate? Will he aggravate anything? Will the Suns be able to rekindle that magic while reintegrating him on the fly? I mean, he went through this early in the playoffs last year, right, with a thumb sprain more than a fracture. It did miss a couple games and came right back. He's not a guy that you would really expect to struggle reintegrating. The question is, I mean, are the Suns, are Chris Paul's teams, as we've seen in general, the type of team that just, kills it all regular season, kind of like the Tom Thibodeau of player coaches, but then they're just out of gas a little bit in the playoffs. They are motivated by detractors saying they got, a helper last season with some injuries to get them to the finals. We saw that when they smacked the Bucks, saying, that this was no fluke. But I don't know, Josh, do you think that that this is a regular season dynamo, kind of like the Jazz we've seen the last few seasons, or are they a team that can have that same success in the playoffs and actually make this run all the way through?
It's all about Chris Paul and whether or not he's playing, isn't it? I mean, they've only played 2 games without him so far this season. and they are 2-0 in those games. There was a point last season where he missed a stretch of time, but it wasn't this close to the end of the season, which is really, what happened was he missed some games. He came back. The Suns got incredibly hot, right, to end the season, and then, essentially came into the playoffs as one of the hottest teams in the league, which is really what you're looking for, a lot of times, is which team is getting hot at the right time, a la the Hawks last season, right, coming on at the end and then making their run into the playoffs and continuing their good play from the end of that regular season. Chris Paul's out 6 to 8 weeks, right? That brings us pretty close to the beginning of the playoffs there in April, and integrating him back. It shouldn't be too hard, to your point. Just basically the way that he plays, and if he hadn't gotten hurt right now, I wouldn't be as worried about them. We've talked. That's a pretty obvious thing to say, but not only would I not be as worried about them, I would have them as the favorite in the West right now over those Warriors, who also have, because of the fact that they have their own injuries right now that we're looking at, especially obviously Draymond Green and how Clay's still coming back. They have their own question marks, but I think really for the Suns, what I'm looking at mostly is, these teams that are sort of closer to the top of the league right now all have like pretty easy remaining strengths of schedule. At least the Suns do, compared to the rest of these contenders. Other than the Suns, who have a remaining strength of schedule that's about the 5th easiest in the league. Everybody else around them is not quite a contender, other than Memphis, who has a slightly easier schedule, and then Dallas, who has a harder schedule. Everybody else that you look at, Miami, 16th easiest, Brooklyn, 13th easiest, et cetera. They're all in the top half of the league, really, in terms of easiest strengths of schedule, hardest strength of schedule, is what I should be saying. And Phoenix has the 5th easiest. So really what I'm saying is Phoenix has already played the bulk of those hard teams. And if you look at how they've done in games that they're favored in, obviously they handle those entirely, but also the games that they're not favored in, where they're a dog, they still handle those games at least straight up. They've only been a dog 6 times, and that was obviously against really good teams, the Warriors, the Jazz, the Nets in a game as well. But when all these teams had their healthy players, they won 4 of those 6 games, right? And the other thing that I really like about them once they get to the playoffs is that home record, which is far and away the best as well this season. Not only are they playing really well at home, they're not allowing you to pretty much do anything that you want on the offensive side of the ball, which is really what you look at in the playoffs. Obviously, it comes down to how well you're able to play defense as things get a lot choppier, and the refs are a little bit, looser with these calls, allowing players to play through some stuff, et cetera. I think all of that leads to, the Suns being the best team for this. But look, Devin Booker shouldn't even be close to getting MVP recognition, in my opinion, this season, not nearly to the extent that Chris Paul should. And I know that's not going to happen, because at the end of the day, we really have stats, and especially traditional stats, that we can work with to determine these things. But Chris Paul is way more important to this team, I think, than Devin Booker is. When you look at fourth quarter numbers, you look at obviously on-off court numbers as well, where this team can survive without Devin Booker. They cannot survive without Chris Paul. He's too specific to what they do. I would make a similar case in a minute for the Warriors with Draymond, where it's always been this question, honestly, since the Warriors came around: is Draymond more important than Steph? Maybe not, but you could make the argument for sure, which is crazy to say. So yeah, without Chris Paul right now, and I don't like what they're going to be able to do once they get into the playoffs, even though I think they'll be fine to continue the rest of the season. Last thing I'll say, I don't think that they get their win total that it currently sits at. It's 61.5 on DraftKings, right? Which means that they need another 14 wins out of their last 24 games. And so, I don't feel great about that, to be honest. If you look at, what they're going to be doing without Chris Paul, does that seem crazy to you?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that is my preferred bet for the Suns. Not anything about the playoffs, but for them to go at least 14-10 down the stretch here against what you mentioned is the 6th easiest schedule remaining. They come out of the break here with the Thunder, Pelicans, Jazz, Blazers, Knicks. There's not a lot of tough games here remaining. They can stay afloat with Devin Booker leading the charge.
I messed up. I don't know why in my head I thought it was 14 out of 18 games that they had to win, but it's 14 out of 24. Right. 14.
They got 24 left.
Yeah, that's all unreasonable.
A team that's 21-2 since January. I trust them for that. But I'm just going to transition to whether they can navigate this Western Conference. And that means, can they beat the Warriors? And that means, is Draymond Green healthy? It's a bigger deal than the Chris Paul timetable, which we know about.
That's true.
When you're dealing with a lingering back injury and you're a player like Draymond that just explodes all over the floor, it's a huge question mark. The Western Conference in general hinges on this. How healthy will he be by the time the playoffs comes around? Because without him, He's missed the last 20 games, and the Warriors are 14-7 their last 21. Looking decidedly average. I mean, they fluctuated between looking good and struggling without Draymond, but I look at, when he's active, they did handle the Suns after losing that first one. I think they beat the Suns in a 7-game series with Draymond healthy. I don't think that there's any teams that are really going to be able to contain them over the course of 7 games and be able to score as consistently as the Splash Brothers will. It's not really going on a limb to say that the Warriors would probably represent the West, but it's completely contingent on his health. So I don't know if that's a great bet for me either. I would actually look at with the Warriors for them to slide down 1.5 games behind Memphis to end the regular season as the 3 seed. And that's plus 225 at DraftKings. I think Memphis can pass them right now, the way Memphis is playing 20-5 in their last 25 versus the Warriors, again, 14-7 the last 21.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. The thing about Memphis, too, that I know we'll also get into in a minute is I think they are a bit more of a regular season team because of the depth that they bring, right? And once you trim those rotations down, that's not quite the case. But yeah, if you want to just look at regular season right now, to your point, especially what they've been doing since Ja came back from the injury. I mean, it's interesting that when he was gone, and we'll talk about this in our MVP video, that when he missed time this season, that it probably hurt his MVP chances because they went 10-1 in that time frame. But then they lost a few games in a row. Ja came back and they struggled in the first 2 or 3. But since then they're 20-5 essentially since he returned from that injury after, and really that includes stuttering out of the gate a bit when he came back. So they're definitely rolling at this point. They fit him right back in. They're right. They fixed their issues at the beginning of the season where they were just playing way too fast to the Grizzlies. Right. And now they've slowed that pace down a lot in their last 20 games or so, which has led to them being a lot better on defense, whereas they were in the bottom 5 or so to start the season for a while. So I think that's really what it comes down to is it's not quite as much even what the Golden State is going to be unable to do without Draymond continuing to miss time, as much as it is about how good I feel about Memphis to continue to close the season really strong in a really strong manner. I think last point about the Dubs before I think we move on is really just Draymond. At the end of the day, this is not a team that I would put any money on to win the Western Conference without Draymond. I wouldn't be surprised if they saw a second round exit and didn't even make it to play against the Suns, who we still probably like in the Western Conference Finals potentially. But I think right now the way that the standings sit, they're going to need Draymond far too much in order for them to beat even a team like let's say the Mavs or the Jazz in the playoffs in the second round, if depending on how that matchup goes in the first round if they play. So ending that point there, with Draymond in the last 2 seasons they are 18-16 without him, but you look at this season especially, they're 28-6 with him, right, which means that they've gotten more than half their losses without him in a slightly shorter time frame this season, right? So it's not the same team. Obviously, it's not even close, and I don't like them to need to rely on Steph to make as many threes as he's going to need to make if they're going to be able to hang with any of these teams. So I don't know. Are you good on the Warriors, or is there any other kind of bets you have before we move on to the Utah Jazz?
No, I agree. Yeah, Draymond, Iggy, if they're healthy in the playoffs, I would expect them to represent the Western Conference. It's not a huge limb. The Jazz, I don't have much to say about in the sense that they're just not a team built to win in the playoffs. That they've lost 6 straight head-to-head against the Suns and 4 of their last 5 against the Warriors, and there's absolutely no chance that I think they can navigate those 2 teams in a playoff series. They have the 5th hardest strength of schedule remaining. Right now, they've really beaten up on their own division and struggled to close any games outside of that. I would look at the fact that they're minus 1,100 to win that division, and the Nuggets are plus 700 at 3 games behind them. I would consider sprinkling a little money on Denver to catch them in that sense. They have a much easier strength of schedule. Michael Porter Jr. back soon. The Nuggets, they sputtered without Jokic, which again, obviously we'll talk about in the MVP, but 1-5 without Jokic, but pretty much the top offensive rating since he's come back. I don't like Utah as a title shot, even though their odds are down a little bit from plus 1,400 to 1,700 after what they opened at this season.
Yeah, it's true. I don't really much care for it either. Obviously, they need to get Rudy Gobert back in there as they did. He played in that All-Star game, which, side note, was hilarious when he screened Chris Paul, who was playing with an injured hand, because he just wanted to get some run in the All-Star game. And then Chris Paul got mad at Rudy Gobert for setting a screen because he's like, I got an injured hand. And Rudy's like, well, then why are you on the court? But Mr. Screen Assist had to do his job out there. We've now seen how crucial he is to this team. But really what we're saying here is, do you believe in the Jazz to continue, to sort of discontinue the trend that's been there for them in the playoffs, where it's if Donovan needs to score 50, and Rudy Gobert needs to be effective enough to stay on the court in the fourth quarter in the playoffs. Both of those things still need, I don't trust at all in the playoffs. But I do think, in the regular season, now that Rudy is back, Utah, I do think that they're somebody. I'm not ready to take the Nuggets over them, although I don't mind the bet just because of that plus 700 for the Nuggies is something that I believe in Jokic that much. But I don't necessarily believe in Utah to just fall away at this point and just disappear. They do need 16 more wins out of their last, 24 games that they have left. So they need to go 16-8, right, to cover their total right now, which is at 51.5 wins on DraftKings for them. So I don't love that bet, but I also don't mind it when you look at the remaining strength of schedule for them, which is also pretty. It's right in the middle there. So, but because they had a pretty easy strength of schedule to start. I'm sorry, I'm looking at them there. Yeah, I mean it's going to be pretty difficult for them. That's another place where I think you're probably right on to eye that Nuggets bet there. I keep messing up the amount of games we have left here, but yeah, essentially being able to do that right now and jump. Jump anybody is not going to happen, but I do think that you can feel good about Memphis at that point. So I don't know. What do you feel about Memphis? Are there any bets that you would like here, whether regular season or otherwise, for them remaining?
Yeah, I like them regular season. Again, kind of like that Chris Paul factor. They're going to be reliable in the regular season, but I don't know what kind of juice they'll have left for the playoffs. Their total is right now 54.5 wins at DraftKings, even money to go over that. So that means winning 15 of their last 22 games, 14 of their last 22, sorry. And I think that's very doable. They're 20-5 over their last 25, and they have the third easiest schedule remaining. They opened the season at plus 10,000 to win it all. Now, that's cut into a quarter, and I don't like the odds there. I do think they will spoil someone's season. I think whether it's the Suns, Warriors, or Jazz, I think one of those teams will get knocked out by the Grizzlies, but I don't see the Grizzlies winning the Western Conference Finals against any opponent should they get there.
Yeah, I think that's really what we're saying. You got to look at their lineups and the amount of minutes that certain guys are playing. I mean, it's interesting. Jaws, and we'll talk about this once again, but Jaws on-off court stats are actually kind of surprising at how small of a disparity there is between when he's on and when he's off the court. They're incredibly successful with or without him, to be honest, which once again, to me, it's actually more of an indication that, that they're winning those, their bench minutes, right? They're getting a ton of bench scoring. I mean, we even saw when they've had a ton of guys down. They've been the team least affected by guys being out, not because they haven't had injuries to guys, to Dylan Brooks, and then obviously Triple J's missing time. We have Ja that missing time, Desmond Bane missing time. It was always next guy up. Guys like John Conchar are in there, playing really well. But when come the playoffs time, that's not going to be the case. You're not going to get nearly the amount of bench minutes, et cetera, that you need. So this is definitely a very good, regular season team right now, which I feel fine, taking the rest of their wins as well. I don't think that there's much of a shot of them not winning the division right now. I mean, they said at minus 1,600, so there's nothing there. But yeah, I think this is just an obvious case of once they get into the playoffs, now it's kind of like, all right, is Jaren Jackson Jr. going to step up and be a third banana? Is Dylan Brooks healthy enough to come back and make an impact? And are there basically their top 3 or 4 guys going to be able to hang, with all the rest of these guys and play those amount of minutes without getting any help from those bench points? And I don't think the answer is yes there. So, but I do think that there's some stuff here we could talk about with the Nuggies, starting honestly with that the fact that I do like that bet for them to win the division at plus 700 with only 3.5 games back, still 24 games to play. Feels like a pretty good bet for them.
Yeah, and I think this is the last team we'll wrap up about. I mean, the Mavs and Lakers are mentionable here. But I mean, the Lakers, it's just an incredible long shot to consider them crawling out right now. The Mavs, I think, are, on the right trajectory, but not ready to win multiple playoff series at this point. The Nuggets, we did see some magic from the last couple seasons, especially in the bubble. Jamal Murray has now been set back, though.
Yeah.
Might not even be ready to the playoffs. Michael Porter Jr. is ahead of his timetable and looks like he might return before the end of the regular season. I do like the Nuggets as that kind of value bet to close the regular season strong, but their numbers in the fourth quarter, Josh, in clutch situations this year are terrible. A lot of that has to do with not having a second scorer around Jokic, who's not really built to close games on as a pure scorer. He's got to run, pick and roll with Murray, et cetera. So I don't know. I don't trust Murray coming back at 100% enough to be that kind of like 40-point threat he was in the bubble that almost got them to the finals. So I don't really want to take any futures on them to win it all unless I see Jamal Murray come back and have a couple good games before the regular season ends.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I feel so bad for them. As soon as it went down, you knew that meant that they probably were going to have to not necessarily punt on this season, but that, despite Nikola Jokic's superhuman performances, it still wasn't super likely that we were going to, to see them, pulling out anything beyond getting a decent seed in the playoffs. I think he's got to do too much at this point for them, to your point. And in that fourth quarter, obviously they hugely missed Jamal Murray, who a couple of seasons ago when he was, in those playoffs, especially in the bubble, where he was having incredible fourth quarters. I believe he had a 22-point fourth quarter and one of those 50-point blowups. So, that's a huge point for them. And I would just finish with saying, as far as the Mavs and Lakers go, I don't know how the Lakers have these odds still. I mean, I guess it's because they're the Lakers, and at the end of the day, if they were able to pull it together with LeBron and AD specifically, that would be a team that could do fine in the playoffs. But at this point, do you trust AD to stay on the court? No. And then as far as the Mavs go, kudos to them. They've been incredible since the start of this calendar year, as we know, 19-6, playing with incredible defense. But there's just not enough scoring there, and it's going to be the same thing we've seen in the playoffs from Luka year in and year out, which is he's going to need to do way too much, especially in those Clippers series just keep coming back to mind of him dropping 35, 12, 9, all these insane Luka stats, and it just not being enough for them to even climb over 105 points or so. So not much to say there, but I think really overall for the Western Conference right now, it's definitely a lot more wide open. I do still think the Suns are a favorite, as I do think Draymond's way too important to what the Warriors would need in a 4-game series for them to be able to pull out that W. But as far as a couple other things there's some juicy odds for these wins. So make sure you are checking that out on DraftKings. And like I said, to start things off, there's a great tool right now on thelines.com to take a look at not only, all these title odds and seeing who's got the best shot at those, but there's, plenty of odds as well that we break down there for who's got the best chance, which sites are offering you the best bang for your buck on that money. So that is all the time we have for you in this one. Make sure you are liked and subscribed to that page and check out those other couple videos we have for you today. Take a look at the Eastern Conference teams and the MVP the MVP odds as well. So until we see you next, happy betting.